There is a book that contains a record of an ancient people who lived hundreds of years ago in the Americas. In the record, it gives this description of the people, and they lived after the manner of happiness. What does it mean to live after the manner of happiness? How do we live a happy life? In this book, the people found it was essential for them to act and not be acted upon in order for them to find joy and happiness. This is a very important idea and principle that pertains to happiness. Today, we are going to refer to this principle as being proactive. There are several principles that govern happiness, but the most important and most foundational to having a happy life is the principle of being proactive. The definition that I would like to use for being proactive is found in a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. In it, he states that proactive means that as human beings, we are responsible for our own lives. It is that our behavior is a function of our decisions, not our conditions. We can subordinate feelings to values. We have the initiative and the responsibility to make things happen. Mr. Covey breaks this being proactive definition down into 4 areas. Let's discuss each of them in a little bit more detail. The first is responsibility. Abraham Lincoln has been quoted to say that people are just about as happy as they make up their minds to be. Every day we have the responsibility for our choices. Let's look at the word responsibility. Let's write it out this way. Responsibility. Responsibility is the ability to respond. We should not blame others for circumstances or conditions or for our behavior. We need to take responsibility for our life. We are responsible to act and not to be acted upon. When it comes to being responsible, in making decisions, we can act in 2 ways. We can be proactive or we can be reactive. We have the ability to see what may come of our decisions. We can anticipate the future and make the best choices we can based upon those anticipations. Most of us will anticipate good and happy outcomes. Being proactive gives us the power to do what it takes to make decisions with the outcomes or consequences that we want. This does not mean that proactive people don't make mistakes. This does not mean that proactive people get exactly what they want out of life. They still get stuck in traffic jams. They still experience bad weather. But proactive people are still influenced by outside forces. But what they do different is how they handle their reactions to their mistakes and to those outside forces. They do this very differently than reactive people. Reactive people are acted upon, and proactive people act. Reactive people see what happens to them as out of their control, and proactive people see that no matter what they have or where they have some kind of control. In the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he gives the example of a gentleman named Viktor Frankl, who was a Jew in the concentration camps during World War II. And he goes on to explain that Viktor Frankl lost his whole family except his sister in these terrible circumstances. He was enslaved. He was treated very badly. And in this situation, he found that he had little control over the things that really mattered. Except for his sister, his entire family perished at the hands of the Nazis. He found himself tortured and enslaved. He says this, that one day, naked alone in a small room, he began to become aware of what he later called the last of human freedoms, the freedom his Nazi captors could not take away from him. They could control his entire environment, but they could not decide how it would affect him. He could not choose his situation, but he could choose how he responded to his situation. He realized that he had little control, but he had absolute control over something that mattered the most, and that was his response to the situation. He realized that he could go into despair and die, or use this experience to become a stronger person. Reactive people make choices based upon impulses. They do not anticipate life or the impact that those choices will have on life. And when life goes the way that they don't want it to, They still see the problem outside of themselves and that they can do nothing about the problem. Let's give the example of a family who on a Saturday wants to plan a picnic up the mountains. The family is excited and looks forward to this picnic all week. When Saturday morning rolls around, they wake up to rain. Mom had anticipated and prepared for the Saturday picnic, and she had also checked the forecast. She had seen that there was a chance of rain, and so she decided to discuss with Dad the possibility of it raining and what their other options were. So they came up with plan B. Let's give the example of a family who decides that on Saturday they're going to go to the mountains on a picnic. The family is excited and looks forward to the picnic all week. When Saturday morning rolls around, they wake up to rain. And in this story, there are many proactive and reactive responses. Mom had anticipated and prepared for the Saturday picnic. She had watched the forecast and found that the weather wasn't guaranteed to be great on Saturday. She talked this over with Dad, and together they came up with plan B and plan C. There was no reason why they couldn't spend time together as a family and still have a fun time. They could have the picnic indoors or underneath the patio. They could go out to eat at a restaurant. They could play games and watch movies. There was no reason why they still couldn't have a fun time. The 10-year-old boy didn't see it this way. He woke up and saw the rain and knew that the rain had ruined his plans and therefore determined his attitude. He was uncooperative and negative about any other idea than the one he wanted. This affected Mom, and because of the young boy's emotions, now Mom was letting the emotions make her decisions as well. No one that morning was happy. This was a simple example, and each day we see that these decisions are being acted out in front of us all of the time. Think about your day today. Was it proactive or reactive? Let's reflect back on if we acted or if we were acted upon. Are you likely to claim that you didn't have control, or are you more likely to take charge in circumstances? When things go wrong, do you ask what you could have done differently, or do you ask why things went the way that they did? When life seems unfair, are you more or less motivated to persist? Do you allow yourself to be shackled by life, or do you work to break the barriers? There is a language that belongs to proactive and reactive people. People who say reactive things like, there is nothing I can do, that's just the way I am. He makes me so mad. Well, they won't let me. I have to. I can't. I must, if only. Proactive people say things like, let's look at other alternatives. I can choose a different approach. I can control my feelings. I can create an effective presentation. I can choose an appropriate response. I choose, I prefer, I will. A serious problem with language is that it becomes self-fulfilling. People can become so reinforced by the way they talk that they sometimes can't help but see the world for the way it isn't. That we can't, or that we have to. That we have no choice, or that we have no say. But we do have a choice, and we have the responsibility to choose. We become what we think about, and what we think about becomes our words. Be proactive even in our minds and in our verbal words. We believe what we say. Be positive. In order for us to be effective in our proactivity, we have to realize and understand that we can, what we can and cannot control. Where we focus our time and energy. Mr. Covey suggests this type of idea. He calls them the circles of concern. The first circle is the circle of concern. In this circle exists the things that concern us and that we may have concerns over, but what we have no control over. Things like the weather, our children's attitudes, the behavior of a spouse. The other circle is our circle of influence. And in this circle exists everything that we do have control over. Everything that, which pretty much leaves us with ourselves and the way we choose to respond. Pause it there. In the outer circle of concern, all the things that affect our lives. The inner circle represents the things that affect our lives that we can control. Our goal should be to make our inner circle as large as possible, meaning this has the ability to grow and it has the ability to get smaller. People who are reactive actively try to shrink their inner circle. They look for reasons why they don't have control. They say things like, he just hates me and there's nothing I can do about it. Society just treats men and women differently. Life would be easier for me if I were rich too. Proactive people are actively trying to grow their inner circle. They say things like, I will get a good grade, I will be proactive today, I will be productive today, and I will find a way to do that. There are some people who interpret proactive to mean pushy, aggressive, or insensitive, but it's not the case at all. They're smart, they're value-driven, and they read reality and they know what's needed. In the book by Stephen Covey, he gives the example of Gandhi and how he was able to win over the people by expanding his circle of influence. He didn't do it sitting in legislature making laws or demanding from people. He did it by influencing the people. It goes on to say that he had held no office or political position, but through compassion, courage, and fasting and moral persuasion, it reads, though he held no office or political position, through compassion, courage, fasting, and moral persuasion, he eventually brought England to its knees, breaking political domination of 300 million people with the power of a greatly expanded circle of influence. Being proactive is the ability to grow our circle of influence to live a happy life.